Hey guys, welcome to the Liberal Hive Mind, a channel solely focused on exposing the abundant hypocrisy of the left. Alright, so little heads up, it's nearly 11 o'clock at night here Eastern time. Not exactly rise and shine, drinking my coffee ready to record videos, but I've been watching the GOP debates for the last hour and a half, and I decided to cut it a little bit early because, I get the gist of it. After an hour and a half of subjecting myself to this nonsense, not only have I had enough, but I've pretty much reached my conclusion, and that conclusion is that my opinion is more or less unchanged. Pretty much my perspective, my opinion on all of these individuals present on the Fox News debate stage, of course omitting Donald Trump, I feel the exact same way about. In fact, I think my previous view is rather reinforced at this point. To make it as simple as possible, to keep it as layman as possible, I see a bunch of neocon losers and Vivek Ramaswamy. That's pretty much it. That right there, I think, is the overarching conclusion of how I felt about the debate. I'm going to make that point in this video specifically. I'm going to record some other videos as well, covering some other topics, of course. But in respect to my holistic view, that's going to be this video. I'll let you guys know where I landed. We got some stuff to get into, so let's roll the tape. All right, folks. So Vivek Ramaswamy, in my opinion, was leaps and bounds above any other individual on the stage. And I think it was rather calculated. I think he knew exactly what he needed to do, maybe to appeal specifically to my personality type and what I'd be looking for, because he came out swinging, trying to set that contrast immediately.
I didn't raise a hand. Let us be honest as Republicans. I'm the only person on the stage who isn't bought and paid for, so I can say that.
He came out right away, ready to rock and roll, hitting hard on that exact issue, calling people bought and paid for.
We're going to bring in.
I just want to finish responding to Mike. I just want to respond to Mike for 1 second because he invoked me back. Listen, now that everybody's gotten their memorized, pre-prepared slogans out of the way, we can actually have a real discussion now. The reality and the fact of the matter is...
Was that one of yours?
Not really, Mike, actually. We're just going to have some fun tonight. And the reality is, you have a bunch of people, professional politicians, super PAC puppets, following slogans handed over to them by their 400-page super PACs last week. The real choice we face in this primary is this. Do you want a super PAC puppet, or do you want a patriot who speaks the truth? Do you want incremental reform, which is what you're hearing about, or do you want revolution?
Okay.
And I stand on the side of the American Revolution.
I've got to address
We're going to take control back here.
Super PAC puppets, bought and paid for. Of course, a bunch of booing erupted from the crowd, but as we know, those are probably the corporate donors that Vivek is literally referring to. But Vivek, I think, hit the nail on the head bang on. I know he stated multiple times that he's not interested in the vice president role, but I honestly think that he's the guy for the job. He is absolutely on the mark. He painted that picture from start to finish, and most importantly, he is right. A couple moments really stood out to me. There was this one.
If former President Trump is convicted in a court of law, would you still support him as your party's choice? Please raise your hand if you would.
Notice who was the first person to immediately, without hesitation, raise their hand. Notice the others, who waited to get the temperature of the room, who cowardly hesitated, like Ron DeSantis, only to raise his hand after seeing a couple of neocons on his left-hand side given to the political pressure he then gives in. That right there was the most telling moment of the debate. You have one guy who isn't scared to raise his hand to take that stance because it's the right thing to do, and you have a bunch of corporate neocon lackeys who are simply puppets and petrified to take a controversial stance. Pathetic. But it wasn't just that moment. On the issue of Ukraine, the same thing.
The administration is now asking Congress for $24 billion more. Regardless of that, the specifics of that plan, is there anyone on stage who would not support the increase of more funding to Ukraine?
I would not support it.
Europe needs to step up. I would have Europe step up and do their job.
All right, Mr. Ramaswamy, but you're saying you would not too, Governor DeSantis?
I will have Europe pull their weight. Right now, they're not doing that.
You would not support
and I think
more
we need
funding?
to do, and I think our support should be contingent on them doing it. And I would have support in China to be able to take China and do what we need to do with China.
Mr. Ramaswamy, you would not support an increase of funding to Ukraine?
I would not. And I think that this is disastrous. that we are protecting against an invasion across somebody else's border when we should use those same military resources to prevent across the invasion of our own southern border here in the United States of America. We are driving Russia further into China's hands. The Russia-China alliance is the single greatest threat we face, and I find it offensive that we have professional politicians on the stage that will make a pilgrimage to Kyiv, to their Pope, Zelensky, without doing the same thing for people in Maui or the south side of Chicago or Kensington. I think that we have to put the interests of Americans first, secure our own border instead of somebody else's. And the reality is, this is also how we project strength by making America strong at home.
Thank you.
Only Vivek raised his hand. Ron DeSantis then trying to share the same stance, but of course, being too scared to just straight up say it, they got all offended when Vivek called them super PAC puppets, but they sure are acting like establishment super PAC puppets. And you know what? The foreign policy debate really was the biggest eye-opener. Vivek, not exactly sure what the perfect pronunciation is for his name, but you guys get it. Again, the only one courageous enough to take a non-warmongering stance. The rest of the neocon crowd, let's call them, all fell in line. Nikki Haley was 100% the worst. Not only spreading misinformation, I mean legitimate fake news, but literally doing the good versus evil thing that I personally constantly criticize. I use it as rhetoric, as a talking point, and then she went and literally did it as her foreign policy stance.
First of all, the American president needs to have moral clarity. They need to know the difference between right and wrong. They need to know the difference between good and evil. Right. When you look at the situation with Russia and Ukraine, here you have a pro-American country that was invaded by a thug. So when you want to talk about what has been given to Ukraine, less than 3.5% of our defense budget has been given to Ukraine. If you look at the percentages per GDP, 11 of the European countries have given more than the U.S. But what's really important is go back to when China and Russia held hands, shook hands before the Olympics, and named themselves unlimited partners. A win for Russia is a win for China. We have to know that. Ukraine is the first line of defense for us. And the problem that Vivek doesn't understand is he wants to hand Ukraine to Russia. He wants to let China eat Taiwan. He wants to go and stop funding Israel. You don't do that to friends. What you do instead is you have the backs of your friends. Ukraine is the front line of defense. Putin has said, once Russia takes Ukraine, Poland and the Baltics are next. That's a world war. We're trying to prevent war. Look at what Putin did today. He killed Prigozhin. When I was at the UN, the Russian ambassador suddenly died. This guy is a murderer, and you are choosing a murderer over a pro-American country.
She's offering a black and white view. It's good versus evil, she says. Putin bad. Putin invade free country. We good. We fight bad Putin. When obviously it isn't that simple. And Putin didn't declare war on Ukraine because of his ego or because he's just some maniacal, evil final boss in the world of foreign policy. We've covered it in great detail, just how complex geopolitics clearly is. There's so much nuance, there's so much history. Yet everything I heard out of these neocon hacks was straight up wartime propaganda. Vivek, once again, the only guy who separated himself from the crowd. And it's also funny because Mike Pence said this earlier in the debate.
I mean, look, Joe Biden has weakened this country at home and abroad. Now is not the time for on-the-job training. We don't need to bring in a rookie. We don't need to bring in people without experience. We need to bring
a smart A remark about job training, essentially insinuating that Vivek is a rookie and therefore he doesn't know what he's doing. Nikki Haley said the same thing in her attack against him, saying he has no experience in foreign policy.
There you have it.
Your watch, so the reality make America less safe. You have no foreign policy experience, and it shows.
And you know what?
If you look all across Washington, if you take a look at the entire Washington political apparatus and establishment, all of these career politicians have horrible track records when it comes to foreign policy. It's one big freaking disaster for the last, 6 decades? Maybe we need some new thinking. Maybe the people who lied about weapons of mass destruction and got the United States in a 20+ year long war, totally destabilizing a massive region of the planet, shouldn't be lecturing others on foreign policy, shouldn't be taking a stance of authority as having experience in foreign policy. Excuse my frustration, I generally don't get animated like this in the videos, but I mean, come on. The only question I have is, are you guys seeing what I'm seeing? You know, is the audience picking up on that clear hypocrisy? Look, what it really boiled down to for me, every one of these clowns except for Vivek Ramaswamy were utterly unimpressive, simply regurgitating rehearsed talking points, sounding like freaking robots, pushing the super PAC talking points as Vivek said it. And then you had Vivek riffing, saying his thing, doing his thing, performing, being honest, hitting hard, most importantly, telling the truth, telling what he believes is the truth on every single issue, having the courage to challenge the status quo, to take a stance that he believes is right. And that pretty much, I think, was the essence of the entire debate. That's my conclusion. I watched it for 2 hours and I could boil it down to exactly that. Neocons +1 is what it felt like. I don't know, call me crazy, but these fake politician, empty suit neocon losers have had a track record of utter failure, disaster. The one time a non-politician, an actual human being again, who doesn't just parrot talking points and sound like a robot, the one time he got in power in those 4 years that he was in office, it seemed like things were finally turning around, didn't it? I'm automatically drawn to authentic individuals and people who aren't warmongering corporate politicians, like Mike Pence talking about peace through strength and using other people's militaries as cannon fodder. One of the most disgusting talking points. You guys.
The Reagan doctrine years ago made it clear. We said, if you're willing to fight the communists on your soil, we'll give you the means to fight them there so our troops don't have to fight them. Vivek, if we do the giveaway that you want to give to Putin to give him his land, it's not going to be too long before he rolls across a NATO border, and frankly, our men and women of our armed forces are going to have to go and fight him. I want to let the Ukrainians fight and drive Putin and the Russians back out.
I'm sick of that kind of rhetoric. I'm sick of this old political doctrine that has done nothing but bring upon chaos, misery, poverty, and a shrinking middle class. Uninterested. Anything genuine, anything human immediately catches my eye, and for me, that was Vivek. I know a lot of people want to know my view on Ron DeSantis. I don't know. He was almost not even present. Boring, no charisma, nothing there. So really not much to talk about. That's what I got for you guys. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. If you did, make sure to leave a like and possibly subscribe to the channel. Of course, we'd love to have you here. I'm probably going to be recording another 1 or 2 videos, let's say. Maybe it'll drop today, maybe it'll drop tomorrow. I don't know, but I got some more to talk about on this debate stuff. Stay tuned for those. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.